Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about the Panama Canal. You know, that incredible feat of engineering that connects two oceans. Well, it's more than just a waterway. It's become a major flashpoint, a real geopolitical chessboard in the growing rivalry between the United States and China. What's happening right now could completely change the power dynamics in the Western Hemisphere. So let's get into it. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Wow. That single sentence from the president kicked off a global firestorm. Now, you might think that's just tough talk, but it's way more than that. It signals a massive, aggressive shift in American foreign policy. And believe me, it has everything to do with China. And you can bet the world has noticed. All of a sudden, online searches for things like U.S. Panama Canal and Chinese ports in Panama have just gone through the roof. But this isn't just idle curiosity. There was a specific event that really lit the fuse for this whole confrontation. To get what's happening, we actually have to look at Venezuela. See, back in early January of 2026, U.S. Special Forces conducted a raid, codename Absolute Resolve, and captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Now, this wasn't just about regime change. No, it was about sending a crystal clear message. And that message established a brand new precedent, something people are calling the Donnerain Doctrine. What is that? Well, it's basically the idea that America has the right to use force on its own to protect its interests in its backyard. And with that precedent set, Washington immediately turned its attention to the next big target, getting Chinese influence away from the Panama Canal. So let's get this straight. China doesn't actually own the Panama Canal itself, but, and this is a huge but, it controls something that might be even more important, the strategic ports at both entrances. And that is what has Washington so incredibly worried. For years now, companies with deep ties to China have pretty much been the gatekeepers of the canal. You've got CK Hutchison, based in Hong Kong, controlling the key ports of Balboa on the Pacific side and Cristobal on the Atlantic. Then there's the China-based Landbridge Group operating a major port right near the Cologne Free Zone. Now, American security officials aren't losing sleep over cargo ships. They're worried about Trojan horses. They look at those massive ship-to-shore cranes made by a Chinese state-owned company and see a potential backdoor for cyber espionage. They see the hundreds of Huawei and ZTE security cameras as a vast surveillance web, and they see these commercial ports as places that could, in a conflict, quickly become home to Chinese warships. Okay, so this isn't just about military posturing. It's also a huge legal fight. And to understand that, we have to rewind all the way back to 1977 and the historic treaties that gave Panama control of its canal. So think about it. The U.S. built the canal, ran it for the better part of a century, and then, in 1999, handed the keys over to Panama. But there was a really important string attached, a document called the Neutrality Treaty. The Neutrality Treaty is right at the heart of this whole mess. It says the canal has to stay open and neutral for everyone, but it also gives the U.S. the permanent right to defend it from any threat. So what does defend actually mean? Well, if you ask Panama, it means working together in partnership. If you ask the U.S. today, it means they have the right to step in alone whenever they feel it's necessary. And if you dig into the treaty's text, you'll see it's a legal minefield. One part says Panama gets to run its own military forces, but a later edition, a reservation by the U.S. Senate, says the U.S. can use its own military force to reopen the canal if it's ever closed. It's this ambiguity, this gray area, that's being exploited to its absolute limit today. You know, before the military threats started flying, the U.S. tried to fight this war on a completely different front: Wall Street. They tried to use financial muscle to push Beijing out of Panama. Here's how it went down. BlackRock, the massive U.S. asset manager, put together a $23 billion deal to buy the ports from CK and Hutchison. The idea was to swap out the Chinese-linked company for an American-led one. But China's state-owned shipping company, COSCO, jumped in and said, not so fast. They threatened to block the whole thing unless they got a piece of the action. The deal froze, and it was a clear sign that for China, this was about a lot more than just business. So where does this leave Panama? Well, they're a small nation caught right in the middle of two giants. But you have to understand, for Panamanians, the canal is everything. It's the alpha and omega, the ultimate symbol of their national pride and their sovereignty. The message from Panama's foreign minister could not be clearer. He said the only hands operating the canal are Panamanian, and that is how it is going to stay. In other words, the canal isn't for sale, it's not a pawn in a bigger game, and it will remain neutral. You're really seeing a clash of two totally different perspectives here. For Panama, this is about sovereignty and national pride. The American threats bring back painful memories of the 1989 U.S. invasion. But for the United States, it's a much colder calculation. 40% of their container traffic goes through that canal. They see it as a vital utility, and its security is just not up for debate. And that brings us right back to where we started, this new Donro Doctrine, a policy that isn't just talk. It's already reshaping the entire Western Hemisphere. At the core of the Donro Doctrine is this radical new idea of an incipient threat. It basically means the U.S. feels it no longer has to wait for an actual crisis, like the canal being physically blocked. Now, just the presence of infrastructure controlled by a rival like China is seen as enough of a threat to justify intervention. It's a fundamental change in the rules of the game. So this is the new playbook, the Panama Pivot. It means actively pushing Chinese companies out of critical projects. It means using credible military threats, like the Venezuela raid, to add muscle to your diplomacy. It means drawing economic red lines, where even things like shipping tools could be called a treaty violation. And it means having a permanent, high-readiness military presence in the region. It's a full-court press, and it feels like it's just getting started. It really seems like the standoff over the Panama Canal is just the opening shot in a new contest for the Western Hemisphere. The old rules of engagement, they seem to be gone. The big question we're left with isn't if this is the new blueprint for American foreign policy, but where in the world the next battle is going to be fought.